Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. Marriages don't break in one night, but sometimes one moment lights the fuse. For me, that moment was a company dinner 6 months ago, when my wife, Claire, laughed louder than she should have, leaned toward her CEO and said, "Sometimes I feel like I have 3 children instead of 2. My husband is just another kid who plays with his gadgets instead of acting like a man." The table erupted in polite laughter, and her boss patted her shoulder like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. I forced a smile, my cheeks stiff, and stared down at my glass of water. She didn't notice. She kept talking, her voice brighter, sharper, as if cutting me down in public gave her some kind of credibility. I didn't argue, I didn't call her out, I didn't even look at her. I sat there quietly, the hum of conversations around me blending into one long static note. On the drive home, she asked if I was sulking. "Don't be so sensitive," she said, scrolling through her phone. It was a joke. Everyone laughed. Maybe to her it was a joke. To me, it was a declaration. She had shown her boss, her colleagues, and me exactly what she thought of me. That night, while she scrolled and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, something in me shifted. I stopped trying to earn her respect with arguments or apologies. If she saw me as a child, I would stop begging her to see me as a partner. Instead, I would quietly become something she couldn't belittle. By day, I worked my modest job in product design for a mid-sized firm. I wasn't a flashy executive, not a suit-and-tie networker, but I knew my craft. I had notebooks filled with sketches, prototypes half-built in the garage, software models I toyed with at night when the house was quiet. Claire used to tease me for it, calling it my toy shop. After that dinner, her words no longer stung, they became fuel. Every evening, once she was asleep, I'd head to the garage and work. I poured every ounce of focus into refining a design I'd been tinkering with for years. A modular product system that simplified everyday use in ways no competitor had achieved. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clever, scalable, and practical. The kind of design that could change a company's direction if pitched to the right people. While Claire mocked me for being a dreamer, I documented everything. I created models, polished presentations, filed provisional patents, and built a prototype from scraps and hours of midnight labor. I didn't share my progress with anyone, not even friends. It was my secret project, my quiet rebellion. Meanwhile, Claire threw herself deeper into her own career. She worked long hours, traveled often, and bragged about how her CEO relied on her. When she came home, she'd talk about office politics like she was part of some exclusive club. She hardly noticed when I was gone in the garage. When she did, she'd roll her eyes. "Still playing with your toys? You'll never change." She was right. I wasn't changing. I was building. One evening, 6 months after that humiliating dinner, she returned home late from work, exhausted, and tossed her bag onto the couch. I was at the kitchen table reviewing final renderings of my design. She glanced at the screen, smirked, and said, "Still pretending you're an engineer? You know no one's ever going to take you seriously, right?" I closed the laptop calmly. "We'll see," I said. She laughed, thinking it was another childish dream that would fizzle. Then she went upstairs, never realizing that my designs were already in the hands of a company looking for exactly what I had built. What she didn't know, and what would soon end everything she thought was secure, was that the company I had sent my prototype to was the same one she worked for. 2 weeks after she mocked me again at the kitchen table, I got an email that made my chest tighten in a way no insult ever had. It was from the innovation division of Claire's company, the one her CEO always bragged about, the one Claire herself wanted desperately to get into, but never managed to impress. They'd reviewed my submission. Not only had they reviewed it, they wanted to schedule a meeting. The email was short, professional, but the last line was the one that made me sit back in my chair, smiling for the first time in months. "Your modular design aligns with an internal shift we've been considering. We'd like to discuss further integration and licensing." Integration, licensing, words that translated to opportunity. I didn't tell Claire. I acted as if nothing had changed. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, listened as she ranted about her coworkers, and slipped back into the garage at night to refine the presentation they'd asked me to bring. Every time she dismissed me as the third child, it only made the silence sweeter. The first meeting was virtual. A panel of engineers, product managers, and one director logged in. They asked me to walk them through my prototype. I explained how the design reduced costs, simplified logistics, and offered customers more flexibility. I answered their questions with calm confidence, every answer built on months of sleepless nights in the garage. By the end, the director nodded. This could save us millions. The next week, they asked for an in-person presentation at headquarters. That's when I realized the full weight of what was happening. Claire had spent years clawing for recognition in that company, craving approval from her CEO. And here I was, invited into the same building, not as her +1, not as her tag-along husband, but as the man bringing the ideas her entire division had failed to produce. On the day of the meeting, I wore my best suit. Claire left early for her own department's morning huddle, complaining that her boss didn't give her enough credit. We kissed on the cheek at the door, her mind elsewhere. She never asked where I was going. When I walked into the boardroom later that morning, I felt a strange calm. The CEO himself sat at the head of the table. Engineers, managers, and directors filled the seats. I set up my slides, my prototype on the table beside me. "Thank you for having me," I began, steady, clear. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through everything: design specs, projected savings, scalability, and customer applications. I showed them the model I'd built with my own hands. I answered every question, countered every challenge, and watched their skeptical expressions shift to curiosity, then to excitement. When I finished, the CEO leaned back, smiled, and said, "Why haven't we seen this before?" The director glanced at him. "Because no one inside thought of it." The CEO looked back at me. "Let's talk licensing, and maybe more than that." I shook his hand, my heart steady. The irony hit me on the way out. Claire was probably 2 floors down, sending emails, hoping her boss would notice her effort. She had no idea that the man she called a child was upstairs signing the beginning of her replacement. Weeks passed, and the project accelerated. My design became their new focus. They assigned teams, built prototypes, and rolled out pilot programs. The buzz spread through the building. Claire came home talking about some secret new initiative that was shaking things up, but no one in her department knew details yet. "People are nervous," she said one night over dinner. "Whatever this project is, it's big. The CEO's obsessed with it. If I could just get a foot in the door, maybe I'd finally get noticed." I nodded, chewing my food, offering nothing. By the 3rd month, the initiative had a name: Project Axis, and Claire's department had been tasked with preparing marketing strategies for it. She came home with brochures, brainstorming sheets, and a laptop full of drafts. "This thing is insane," she said, almost giddy. "It's going to change everything. I don't even know who came up with it, probably one of the golden boys upstairs, but the CEO is treating it like the crown jewel." I listened quietly, my chest tight with restrained satisfaction. She was holding my work in her hands, admiring it, not knowing it came from the man she mocked. By the 4th month, rumors swirled about restructuring. Departments that had underperformed were under review. Claire grew anxious. "They're cutting costs everywhere," she muttered. "If I don't prove my value, I could be on the list." I watched her panic grow while my meetings with leadership multiplied. They offered me a consulting contract, then a permanent role in the innovation division. I accepted. The first day I walked into headquarters with a badge that had my name on it. Not as a guest, but as an employee. I saw Claire in the lobby. She froze. "Martin, what are you doing here?" I smiled politely. "First day, innovation division." Her face drained. "You... what?" The elevator dinged. I stepped inside. "I'll tell you later. I don't want to be late." The doors closed on her stunned expression. That night, she demanded answers. "How long have you been? Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her evenly. "Would you have respected it if I had? Or would you have laughed like you always do?" She said nothing. From then on, everything shifted. She watched the initiative she thought would save her career become the vehicle of her undoing. Meetings she once fought to get into now opened with my presentations. Her CEO praised me in front of the very people she had once impressed with her husband-as-child joke. She never laughed about it again. Claire tried to pretend nothing had changed after she saw me in the lobby that morning, but her eyes gave her away. For years she'd walked into that building with her head high, knowing she was part of the inner circle. Now, every time she glanced at me in the cafeteria or passed me in the hall, she looked unsettled, as if the ground under her heels had tilted. At home, she barely spoke about work anymore. When she did, it came out sharp, defensive. "You don't even know how hard my department has been working on the Axis launch," she snapped one night. "It's not just your little invention making this happen." I set down my fork. "I never said it was, but the CEO seems to think otherwise." She glared, then looked away. Silence stretched across the table, heavy with everything we didn't say. Inside the company, Project Axis grew like wildfire. Teams from every department were reassigned. Entire budgets were rerouted. The CEO held weekly updates, and each time he'd highlight the progress we'd made on scaling the design. My name appeared in newsletters, in board slides, even on patents filed through the legal department. Claire's department, meanwhile, was floundering. Marketing plans that used to be their pride were constantly revised because the product kept evolving. Deadlines slipped. Her boss blamed the staff. Whispers spread. Maybe the department wasn't needed in its current form at all. By the 5th month, rumors became announcements. The company planned a restructuring. Some departments would merge. Others would be dissolved. Project Axis would be the centerpiece of the company's future, and every role was being evaluated based on whether it contributed directly to the initiative. Claire came home pale that night, dropping her bag onto the couch. "They're cutting entire divisions," she whispered. "I don't know if I'll have a job by the end of next month." I listened quietly, the same way she once laughed at me while I sat in silence. "Maybe it's time for a change," I said evenly. She stared at me, as if waiting for sympathy, but I offered none. 2 weeks later, the official notice landed. Her department was being absorbed into a smaller unit. Positions were consolidated. Only half of the team would stay. Claire's name wasn't on the list. That evening, she walked into the house carrying a cardboard box filled with her desk items. Framed photos, pens, a half-dead plant. She set it down on the counter and sank into a chair, her face blank. "They let me go," she said flatly, "after all these years." I looked at the box, then back at her. "After mocking me in front of your CEO, I didn't think you'd expect much loyalty from him." She flinched. "You don't have to enjoy this." "I don't enjoy it," I said calmly. "I just see it for what it is." For weeks, she spiraled. She sent out resumes, went to interviews, but every time the questions came back to Project Axis. "Do you have experience with this system? Do you understand the design principles behind it?" Each time she had to admit she didn't, and each time the conversation ended politely but quickly. Meanwhile, my role expanded. I was promoted to head a new division entirely, with a team reporting to me and a budget that dwarfed anything Claire ever managed. The same CEO who once laughed at her joke now shook my hand and called me the future of the company. At home, Claire's silence grew heavier. She stopped mocking me, stopped calling me childish. She barely spoke at all. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and she knew it. One night, 6 months after she lost her job, she finally broke the silence. "Martin," she said softly, "I made a mistake." I looked up from my laptop. "Which one?" Her eyes filled with tears. "The dinner, the joke, all the times I belittled you. I thought I was making myself look strong, but I only made myself look small. And now you've done everything I said you couldn't." I closed the laptop and studied her. "Respect isn't given in speeches, Claire. It's shown in how you treat people when you think no one's keeping score." She wiped her face. "Can we fix this? Please?" I stood, walked past her, and opened the garage door. The smell of oil and wood shavings drifted out. The same garage she once mocked as my toy shop. I looked back at her. "This is where you lost me, Claire. You didn't just laugh at me in front of your CEO. You laughed at the man who built the thing that replaced you." Her tears fell harder. "I didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You never cared to look." That night, I slept in the guest room. Within a year, our marriage ended quietly, without screaming or scandal. The papers were signed, the assets divided, and Claire moved into a small apartment across town. She tried to fight for more, but the company records were clear. Every major advance had come from my work alone. When I packed up her things, I found the old photo of that dinner, the one her colleague had snapped the night she made the joke. In the picture, she was laughing, her boss smiling beside her, while I sat in the background staring down at my glass. I framed that photo and set it on my desk, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the night she thought I was nothing but a child. And every time I smiled, knowing my silence had been sharper than any comeback. Today, Project Axis defines the company's identity. My designs are in homes, offices, and factories across the country. My name sits on patents, on press releases, on awards Claire once dreamed of chasing. As for Claire, she still sends the occasional message. "Hope you're doing well." I'm proud of you. I never reply. Because the real revenge wasn't in gloating or in cruel words. It was in letting her watch from the outside while the child she mocked became the architect of her downfall. And that is how I ended it, not with rage but with proof. Proof that respect once lost can never be regained. Months after the divorce was finalized, I found myself back in the same restaurant where everything had started, the one where Claire made her third child joke. This time, I wasn't sitting quietly in the background. I was there as the guest of honor, invited by the CEO himself to celebrate Project Axis, crossing its first billion in revenue. The same waiters bustled between tables, the same string lights glowed above the bar, but the seating was different. I was at the head of the table now, with executives leaning toward me for input, hanging on my words. I gave clear answers, not flashy ones, but enough to remind them why my work had become their foundation. Halfway through the evening, I caught sight of someone near the entrance. Claire. She hadn't seen me yet. She was dressed simply, her shoulders hunched as she placed takeout orders for another table. Working as a part-time event coordinator, it seemed. Our eyes met for just a second. She froze, her lips parting like she had something to say, but no sound came out. I gave her a polite nod and returned to my conversation. The CEO was asking about the next phase of Axis, and my focus was there, not in the past. When I left that night, I walked past her without a word. She looked at me the way a person looks at a photograph of themselves from a life they barely remember. Wistful, regretful, hollow. Driving home, I realized the full circle had closed. She once stood in that restaurant mocking me to climb a little higher in her boss's eyes. Now she stood on the sidelines, watching me stand where she once wanted to be. And the truth is, I didn't hate her. I didn't even pity her. I simply didn't carry her anymore. The boy she called another child was gone. The man she never saw was finally all that remained.